Welcome back to another math video. And just to remind you guys, the previous video and this video, the main purpose aside from teaching you this specific thing is to prepare you guys for the main series on this channel, which is the Art of Math series. So if there's any other topics, so like this will be the final video for now in this preparation series. So if there are any other topics you feel like I've missed, you really want covered, any questions, comments whatsoever, feel free to let me know. All right, so how to get good at negative numbers. So I'm going to focus specifically on addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Let's take care of multiplication and division first because that's actually, I find, a little faster and easier. So that's going to be over here on the right. And all you need to know is, so I'm just running through an example with the 4 and the 2 and various combinations of negatives on either the 4 or the 2. So a positive 4, which is just a regular 4, times a positive, as you guys know, is just 8. I've emphasized that it's positive by putting the plus. You don't need to put the plus. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. In other words, or 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. These are the same thing. Where the minus is doesn't matter. Now, if you have a negative on each one, that flips to a positive 8. So rather than thinking about it this way, when I'm doing these, I often just focus on the numbers, like the 4 and the 2. So basically, I do the multiplication and the division of like the meat, which is the 4 and the 2, and then I look at the minuses. So I say, oh, there's 2 minuses, so a negative negative is a positive. In other words, if you have one negative, and then you flip it, again, you turn it back into a positive. So that's why it's an 8. And you could think of this in terms of a negative can be like a bad thing or you owe somebody money. But if you owe a negative amount of money, that's like actually a good thing because now you don't owe any money, somebody owes you money. So a negative negative is a good thing. So you could think of it as the enemy of your enemy is your friend if you want. So a negative negative is actually good. All right. So in other words, if you have, let's say, negative 12 times negative 37, do the 12 and 37, ignore the negatives, and at the end, make sure to get the negatives right. So I do those two parts separately. So here's a question just to make sure you guys are getting this. Let's say you have negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, dot, dot, dot just means keep going, multiplying, times another negative 1. So 100 of these negative 1s multiplied. So let's see what would happen. We don't actually have to do this 100 times. We have a negative 1 multiplied by another becomes a positive 1. Multiplied again, back to negative 1. So it's going to keep flipping. So we have negative, now it's positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Since we have 100, the first one is number 1, so all the odd ones will be negative. So 1 is negative, 2 is positive, 3 is negative, 4 is positive, and so on. Since 100 is even, we're going to end up on a positive. So that should be plus 1. All right. So now let's focus the majority of our efforts on the plus and the minus. So the addition and the subtraction. There's two main tips I want to give you guys, which are practice all combinations, and I'll explain in a second what I mean by that. And number 2 is practice each combination enough times, several times. So don't worry about number 3. The 1 and 2 are the main ones. So for example, you might have an operation. So you might have 5 plus 2. So that plus is your operation. The 5 and the 2 are the numbers. In our case, they're both positive numbers. But you want to practice a negative 5 adding a negative 2 or a negative 5 subtracting a negative 2, any combination of these. Now on top of these, you can make it redundant. So in other words, this is not even the whole thing because check out the second line. This is the same thing, but here I've actually made it more obvious or more explicit. I've actually said, hey, in case you didn't realize, that's a positive 5. Now, I know you guys realize this from here, but if you start with the second one, you might get really confused trying to go back down to the first one. So just make sure you're practicing all of the combinations. If you find like a specific combination confuses you, practice that one more. So for example, you have the addition here. You have the inner positive signs with that addition. That's a standard 5 minus 2, but then you could flip it around, 2 minus 5. That would get you negative 3. You could have 5 plus negative 2. So all these 3 things with the arrow, they're actually all the same ones. And I'm just going to quickly pull up the paper. If you recall in the previous video, we said that all four of these are the same thing. So 5 plus a negative 2, that plus a negative is the same thing as if we just had a 5 minus 2. So in your mind, it's really helpful to just simplify this and just turn this into a minus. And it's the same thing if you see a minus plus. Similarly, you want to turn that into a minus as well. To help you with that, again, you might want to refer to the previous video and make up an example such as this one, like a really monster example, and convert it into a simplified version. Like, so you would drop that extra plus sign, the plus minus will get converted into a minus, and so forth. All right. So far everything's pretty good. But let's get to this one. So now let's say you have more challenging numbers, like negative 17 plus 29. There's two ways of doing it. They're almost equally good, but I prefer one method. For small numbers, it doesn't really matter, but if these get like pretty hard, then the second method becomes better. So the first method is probably the one most of you have been taught, which is the number line. So let's visualize negative 17 to the left of 0, right? And then we're going to add 29, so we're moving 29 to the right. So how do we move 29? Well, let's first get to 0. We've chopped off 17 steps. Now we have another 12 steps to cover a total of 29. So that's why this will give you 12. So that's the visualization on the number line. Now you don't actually have to draw this out. So like I would do this in my head. I would imagine a negative 17 and imagine moving 29 to the right. So that would be the number line approach. Or an approach I prefer generally is, which is pretty clever, we can reverse this around. So we can say that 29 can come first because, for example, if you do 3 plus 5 or 5 plus 3, that order doesn't matter. Addition is associative. The association doesn't matter. So we can put that negative 17 second, and if we do that, then it becomes plus a negative, which is just a minus. So rather than thinking of this as a negative 17 plus a 29, you could think of it as just 29 minus 17, which is 12. And I find this is faster and easier to get right. So basically we've rearranged the problem. So if you have negative 85 plus 103, I would think of it as 103 minus 85. So those are the two methods you can use. They're both pretty good. I prefer this one. But in some cases, it depends on the problem. That's why you guys have to practice all the combinations. So let's say you have a negative 17 minus 29. In that case, they're both almost like equally good. So we could visualize the negative 17 on the number line approach, and minus 29 means we're moving 29 to the left. So what's 29 to the left of negative 17? That means we're going even more negative, so that's going to be negative 46. So, or you could think of it as the rearranging approach and just think, wait, if we're going more negative, that means the 17 is going to be ganging up with the 29, so they're just all accumulating. So let's ignore all the negative sign and the minus, and just add 17 and 29, and then we'll just tack on the minus at the end. So that'll be negative 46. I like both of these, and I use both of these all the time. So in this type of example, we have a negative number minus a number. I'll use both. In this one, I tend to prefer the rearranging one, but I'll sometimes use that as well. So make sure you guys practice all of these combinations. That's really the secret. The secret is not doing like 100 of these. It's doing a little bit of all of them. Well, actually, step 2 is make sure you're doing enough of each combination so you get comfortable with it. Step 3, which is just like the cherry on top, if you really want to master this, you don't want to do like 50 of one combination and 50 of another. You want to be able to mix and match different problems, like we have all sorts of combinations here, and do all of them back to back really, really fast. So again, I'm going to refer to the previous video's example, which is over here. So, and you want to make it harder, you can even put in multiplications and divisions. You can even fractions. Make this as hard as you want. And the idea is you have to very quickly figure out what to do because each of these is a slightly different case. So you can make up your own, ask your friends to make it up, your parents, teachers, whatever. So that's how I would recommend doing it. So again, the key idea, if you get nothing else from this video, make sure you're practicing all the combinations. All right, I will see you guys Well, actually, I'm for now I'm going to wrap up this series here. But if I get requests for other material or if other things come to mind, I'm going to create other videos in this series, which is the preparation for the Art of Math series. So otherwise, at this point, I'd recommend going to the Art of Math playlist, which is the main math series. All right, I'll see you guys there.